Sir, if I am starting this screen share, I'm going to share the screen.
Please
So,
start.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, the screen is audible.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes,
Yes.
can you see the screen?
Deepali.
Sorry.
yes. Please start.
Yes. Sir, Kannan, sir,
Okay.
whether the broadcast is ready.
Yes, sir. You are live, sir. Already, you can start.
Okay. So, good morning to everyone on behalf of Faculty of Law for the 71st Constitution Day celebration. So, if I find the Constitution being misused, I shall be the first to burn it. These are the words of the great philosopher Dr. Ambedkar. This is not a formal Constitution Day celebration. In this 71st Constitution Day celebration, we are going to be enlightened by the special address of our Justice K.T. Thomas, former Judge, Supreme Court of India, on the topic challenges faced by the Indian Constitution. Now, I consider it as a great opportunity to introduce our Professor Dr. D.K. Dinkar to give a welcome address for this gathering. Professor, sir, you are over to you, sir.
Hello?
Hello.
Sir, you are audible, sir.
Yeah, can I start?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Very good morning to one and all. At the outset, I would like to thank our Dean, Professor Dr. Guru Dutt, for giving me an opportunity to deliver the welcome address, especially welcoming an eminent personality like Honorable Justice K.T. Thomas. My Lord, we are extremely delighted because of your presence. Our faculty and students are so lucky to hear your special address on a very significant topic, the challenges faced by the Indian Constitution. When we talk about the challenges faced by or facing by the Indian Constitution, it is necessary to measure our own accountability as per the constitutional norms. Nowadays, what is visible is that the constitutional accountability has been eroded to a great extent. Every time we are used to inflict aberrations on the body of the Constitution. The most interesting thing is that majority of the challenges are coming from the side of the state itself, who is bound to protect the constitutional values. Recently, we have seen what happened in Kerala. The governor of Kerala has promulgated an ordinance to amend the Kerala Police Act, inserting a new section 118A, which criminalizes the abusive, humiliating, and defamatory content in communications. The amendment was immediately withdrawn by the governor due to public protest and criticisms from various corners. I would like to call Section 118A as a ghost of Section 66A of the Information Technology Act, which was already struck down by the Supreme Court due to unwarranted invasion into the liberty of the citizens. In fact, we are repeating mistakes. As constitutional machinery, it is a duty of the state to check the constitutionality of the actions proposed to be performed. In the occasion of our 71st Constitutional Day, what I would like to convey you is that we need to inculcate more constitutional values. Now I am stopping here and entering into my duty. First, I would like to welcome our special guest, Honorable Justice Padma Bhushan K.T. Thomas. So this is not the first time I'm inviting him. Whenever I approach him, without any hesitation, he will accept my invitation and come and illuminate the program. My Lord, on behalf of the Faculty of Law and Management of SRM University and on my personal behalf, I heartily welcome you to this program. Next, I welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir. Sir, I welcome you to this program. I also welcome our Registrar, Dean, HOD, other dignitaries, faculty members, staff, and students to this program. And I wish the program a great success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your welcome address. In the matters of truth and justice, there is no difference between large and small problems. For issues concerning the treatment of people are all the same. These are the words of Albert Einstein. The man, throughout all the walks of his life, followed in a way to set example to others is none other than our Honorable Justice K.T. Thomas, former Judge, Supreme Court of India. I deem it as my privilege to introduce our Honorable Justice K.T. Thomas to the audience. Justice K.T. Thomas, born in the year 1930, January 30, born at Kottayam, Kerala. He completed his law at Madras Law College. In 1960, he enrolled as an advocate. In the year 1976, he became the delegate to the World Peace Conference and also chaired the commission set up in that conference. In 1977, he became the district and session judge at Kottayam. And to be noted here, he was the first rank holder in that examination. In 1985, he became the judge at High Court of Kerala. In 1995, he became the acting Chief Justice at High Court of Kerala. In the year 1996, he became the judge at Supreme Court of India. For his excellency, in the year 2006, Justice was awarded with the most prestigious award, Padma Bhushan, by the government of India. Apart from this, he was the chairman of the Police Reforms Monitoring Committee, and he was also the chairman of the School Review Commission. And the most remarkable achievement that as far as the legal fraternity is concerned, he wrote the book Honeybees of Solomon, which is a wonderful book for our law fraternity. So I welcome our Chief Justice Padma Bhushan K.T. Thomas to give a special address in this. I welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chancellor, members of the faculty, my dear friend Dr. V.R. Dinkar, and all the members of the audience. I am really delighted. I feel overwhelmed in getting such an opportunity to address the audience, selected audience of the SRM University on a day which is very, very important in the legal world of the world. Actually, it should have been on the 26th of November, being the law day, but due to weather conditions, we were not able to complete or even execute that, implement that work. So it had to be postponed. I know that I am here with you on account of my long association with Professor Dr. V.R. Dinkar. I was approached by Mr. K.K. Venugopal, the present Attorney General for India, to chair the constitutional chair of Kannur University, where he had instituted in the name of his great father, Barrister N.K. Nambiar, a chair, for which he made a very huge amount of fund for conducting the chair. That was a time when Dr. Dinkar was the head of the Department of Law in that university. So we had very many occasions for interactions with each other. And K.K. Venugopal used to mention that among the universities where he had invested this fund in the name of his father. It was Kannur University which had conducted the seminar and other programs very well. Though he paid thanks to me and tribute to me for conducting these seminars. In fact, it is only a matter where he should have thanked Dr. Dinkar for that great success in the matter. So I am happy that I could come again in contact with Dr. Dinkar, and he used to call me on another one or two more occasions when he was outside Kerala. Now may I go to my subject today? That is, it was on 26th of November 1949, the Constituent Assembly completed the epic work of making the Constitution of India. Not only that, on that day, 1949, part of the Constitution came into force. As mentioned in Article 394, 16 articles which were necessary for preparing India to become a full-fledged republic on the 26th January 1950 were brought into force on the 26th of November 1949. That is the day when the constitution making became completed. Everybody's signature had been obtained, those who are members of the Constituent Assembly. And they mentioned that very date and said that this is the day we are signing it. Ever since that, this day is observed as a law day or a constitution day. For the lawyers and the legal members of the legal world, this is very, very important. There are many constitutions in the world. Some are older than Indian Constitution, and some others are later. US Constitution, United States Constitution, is perhaps the oldest among them. Is there any special significance for Indian Constitution? If I venture to say that the greatest event in the history of the world is the Indian Constitution. I'll try to substantiate my point. On the Independence Day, 1947, only 1/3 territory of the present republic became independent. The remaining 2/3 were under the sovereignty of the powerful monarchs in India. In other words, 2/3 of the territorial area, which is now what is called India, were not independent, strictly, politically or even economically. But later on, there were 565 such monarchs who were later on persuaded to join the republic. And even it is a wonder, it is a miracle how we were able to achieve such a feat. In the world history, such a feat is unknown earlier. For bringing down one monarchy in Russia, which later became the Republic of Soviet Union, the amount of blood shed for that purpose. Even today, if you go to St. Petersburg, there are relics of that great bloody revolution. Even to create a republic in France, we have read French Revolution where the rivers of Paris ran red with blood. But look at in India, 565 powerful monarchs were asked to surrender their sovereignty before the will of the people without shedding one drop of blood. That is why I said that it is the greatest event in the history of the world, what we now call Constitution of India. This 565 independent monarchies. Some of them were as powerful as any European countries, as large as European nations even today. Even one of the nations where I was born, called Travancore, they declared independence and they became an independent nation. And they appointed a vice chancellor, an ambassador from the United States of America. It was in such a background that whenever we mention about this task, if a single person is to be mentioned for that, it must be Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, with whom a Kerala man called V.P. Menon worked such a way. Because I gather many information on this integration of Indian states from the book authored by him called Integration of Indian States. That is why I say again, repeat, that it was a miracle that the entire nation, consisting of those 565 sovereign states, together with the 1/3 territory, became a republic on the 26th of January 1950. Under one law and one republic, all citizens in the subcontinent were brought under one law, treated everyone, kings or war councillors, rich or poor, beggar or lord, they have all attained equal status before law. Again, look at the diversities of this country. This vast territory, different religions, different cultures, different languages, different scripts, different races, and different castes. Along the diversities, the unity is knit together through the Constitution of India. After the Constitution was made, Winston Churchill, who was the Prime Minister of Britain, said that this new republic may have a life of only a few more years. It's going to disintegrate. Because he could not even visualize that this territory consisting of so many different sovereigns will again come to work. He said after a few years, this will balkanize and disintegrate itself. We had a very eminent constitutional expert at that time called Dr. Ivor Jennings. He read our constitution and then said, this is too prolix, but maximum I can visualize it may collapse only by seventh year. It will last only for 7 years and then it will collapse. Being an expert in the constitutional region, constitutional law, he was appointed to draft a constitution for Ceylon. He accepted the work and made a constitution for Ceylon, which was then declared to be perfect. But you know what happened to that constitution? After 7 years, it collapsed. Look at the irony. The constitution which Ivor Jennings predicted having a life period of 7 years, India is after 70 years, even now it is thriving very well. Whereas the constitution which he made with an expertise collapsed after 7 years. It is an irony of fate for him. Many challenges are now being faced in the constitutional exercise of the country. The focal features of the Constitution: dignity of every Indian citizen. This is the focus. Second is justice, social, political, and economic. These are mentioned in the prefatory portion of our Constitution called the preamble. Many challenges have been faced by the Indian Constitution. Some of the challenges were nearing fatality, but we survived it. is not possible to enumerate all those challenges during the limited time now available to me for my speech. So I would only refer to a few of them now. The foremost among them was when Indira Gandhi's government amended Article 368 of the Constitution, which enables Parliament to amend any part of the Constitution. Originally, that was the situation. The background of how Indira Gandhi had to step in for this purpose is a judgment was pronounced, which I may call a faulty judgment, by the Supreme Court, 11-judge bench, in a case called Golaknath. The majority out of 11 judges bench held that no fundamental right in Part 3 of the Constitution can be amended at all. It was a faulty judgment and it needed correction. So Indira Gandhi government, which commanded 2/3 majority in Parliament at that time, amended Article 360 itself to circumvent that decision. But the amendment created more problems than the judgment, as it enabled a 2/3 majority of Parliament to make unrestricted amendment in future for the Constitution. As that very amendment was challenged by a batch of petitions questioning the validity of some of the enactments, the Supreme Court heard in a very momentous manner. A 13-judge bench was constituted by the then Chief Justice of India. Through the famous Keshavananda Bharati case, a narrow majority of that bench created an epoch-making interpretation that there are inherent limitations as basic structure of the Constitution cannot be altered. This judgment is hailed world over as the most landmark in the constitutional history of the world. That judgment really protected the Constitution of India from future attempts by parliamentary majority to destroy the essential features of the Constitution. In fact, the one person who came out as a hero in that episode is Nani Palkhiwala, who is hailed from then onwards as the real father of the modern Constitution. The way in which he presented the case, I was a lawyer at that time. The English papers published almost verbatim every day's proceedings. I used to read that at that time. It was a remarkable, very wonderful. It is astonishingly wonderful how he presented his new theory that there is inherent limitation for every constitution, even if 368 is enlarged in scope. That challenge was survived actually by the judgment. It was Keshavananda Bharati judgment which protected the Indian Constitution as we are enjoying today. The next challenge of the Constitution, which the Republic had to face, was regarding the width of Article 21. Article 21 reads, "No person shall be deprived of his life or liberty, save in accordance with the procedure established by law." This is actually, according to me, the fulcrum of the Constitution, around which the sheaves are rotating. The challenge which the Constitution faced was on account of the interpretation which was accorded to Article 21 by a 5-judge bench in what is called A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras. And I was a student of the Madras Law College. Our Professor Arunachalam, constitutional law professor, used to say the best case ever presented before the Supreme Court and the best judgment ever delivered by the Supreme Court was A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras. I was a student in 1957. Correct, it was in 57 when he said it was so. But things changed fast because the 1950 this judgment was pronounced. It remained, the ratio remained in the field for more than 28 years. The Supreme Court found the danger which such an interpretation created during emergency. Because the interpretation is procedure established by law means if a parliament or a lawmaking legislature can comply with all the formalities of passing a law, that is enough. So the life and liberty of an Indian citizen could be taken away through a law passed by parliament or state legislature by complying with the formalities. That is the narrow interpretation given at that time by a majority. Justice P.V. Mukherjee dissented at that time. Therefore, the majority decision continued until it had to be reconsidered. During emergency, they found the great danger involved in such an interpretation. Because during emergency, 150 MPs were detained in prison, and with the remaining two-thirds majority passed any number of laws taking away the freedom of the Indian citizens. Many persons were detained in jail, and the infamous, notorious judgment ADM Jabalpur had to be pronounced during that time. So after emergency was over, Supreme Court secured an opportunity for having a relook because of large number of draconian laws could be passed with the help of two-thirds majority of parliament, and even without two-thirds majority, simple majority, and then the right of the citizens could be derailed. I propose to mention during that time, two amendments became very notorious. One is 42nd Amendment, and the other is 43rd Amendment of the Constitution. But even 42nd Amendment was not all bad things. There were good things. One of the good byproduct of the 42nd Amendment was the incorporation of a new part in the Constitution called the fundamental duties of the Indian citizen. It would not have come because Indian Constitution never thought it was necessary at any time that the people should be told you have fundamental duties also. That was a time when people were denied of their fundamental rights, and that was given. But a time reached, and during 42nd Amendment period, fundamental duties had to be incorporated for the purpose of informing the Indian people that you have not only to safeguard your rights, you have more important thing is your fundamental duties. I propose to deal with two more challenges. Article 19 consists of freedom. All citizens have the right to freedom of speech and expression. There are other freedoms also mentioned, but I am confining only to this. By clause 2, the lawmakers are allowed to impose reasonable restrictions on the right in the interest of 8 topics. One of the topics is defamation. I am narrowing down for this aspect. In the interest of defamation, reasonable restrictions could be imposed on the right to freedom of speech and expression. The issue of defamation acquired very great importance in the post-constitution era because the scope of media, both print and electronics, had to deal with this aspect. The reputation of a citizen is regarded by the constitutional authorities as an asset of an individual. it cannot be lightly dealt with. A person who is defamed through a publication could be proceeded against. The law which empowered a citizen to protect his reputation is both on the criminal side and on the civil side. On the criminal side, an action could be made before a criminal court for punishing the publisher for the matter of defaming the reputation of a citizen. Any person, and the other is on the civil side, where a person can claim damages compensation by saying that my reputation has been badly injured. Any person publishing an imputation which is defamatory to another can escape only if he satisfies the court, whether in civil or criminal, that he published it bona fide and for public good. On this aspect, the celebrated decision of the Supreme Court in Harbhajan Singh versus State of Punjab is considered as good law for protecting the bona fide publication. But the problem is, it is now felt the problem is now it is felt that the saturation of social media publication without any clutch or bridle. I am dealing this aspect because Dr. Dinagar mentioned in his prefatory speech about what is done by the Kerala government with the Police Act, incorporating section 118A and then later withdrawing it. That is contextually very important. Under Criminal Procedure Code section 198, a prosecution was permissible only if the defamed person himself moves the court, as no police could take cognizance of such an offense. Look at the plight of an ordinary citizen. When he is defamed through the press, through the media, or even social media, which is galore now, can he be expected every time to go to the court and file a complaint, wait for the other procedures to be completed? And I suggest the situation can be improved by making the offense cognizable by a police report. Something must be done for the aggrieved person. He cannot be asked, you go to the court, spend money from your pocket and conduct a prosecution every time. I agree with Professor Dinakar when he said that Article 118 contains perilous provisions which should have been thought of earlier. But it is not all bad. The sum total of goodness in that amendment is that it is a cognizable offense. Make it a cognizable offense without other clutches. And in that case, the fame and the reputation of an Indian citizen, which is protected by the Indian Constitution, can be safeguarded better. The next aspect which I propose to deal with is about Article 25 of the Constitution, which confers a right to freedom of religion. It contains two vivid rights. Into two vivid areas. One, freedom of conscience. Second, freedom to profess, practice, and propagate religion. Both are subject to four other topics subject to public order, public morality, public health, and other fundamental rights. In other words, the Constitution wanted to keep more importance to public order, to morality, to health, and other fundamental rights than religious freedom. Freedom of conscience includes freedom to have no religion also. In other words, any atheist and agnostic should also have the freedom to practice what he believes to be true. I would say at the first instance itself, when I mention in defense of atheism or agnostic, I am not an atheist at all. I am a believer in God. That is a different matter. We are dealing with the constitutional aspect of it. I wish to pose here. Do the atheists and agnostics have the same freedom as believers in religion? If the atheists criticized a religion, police would initiate case against him for offense under section 295 or 298 of the Indian Penal Code. 295 is whoever insults the religion by any person. 298, whoever wounds the religious features of others. Without criticizing religion or faith of a religion, how can an atheist establish his case? And if an atheist would say that, he will be prosecuted, but not a believer in religion. So this is a secular republic. If religious feelings of one person is protected, feelings against religion should also be protected. See, here is the occasion for me to mention about the judgment of the Supreme Court dealing with the Sabarimala entry of the women, the right of women to go to Sabarimala and worship. The Supreme Court, before the review petition was entertained, declared that any rule, any direction barring a woman to go to Sabarimala to worship while permitting male to have the worship is violative of the fundamental right of the Indian Constitution, Articles 15 and 16. And they struck down one of the rules which permitted the government to impose a rule prohibiting them to do so. Who created all the trouble against that when such a judgment was passed? The pilgrims, mostly pilgrims going to Sabarimala created situation, and it's taken up by political parties. All political parties joined together and opposed the judgment. It was at that time that a review petition had been heard, and they decided to have a relook at this judgment and posted it. Only one judge which did not agree with the review petition to be posted for a larger bench is Justice Rohindran Nariman. Incidentally, I will say that Rohindran Nariman is the only priest of a religion remaining as a judge of the Supreme Court of India. He is a priest of the Zoroastrian religion. He is a scholar of that religion. He had written wonderful books on that religion. In fact, one book I am still having with me, Under Fire, Zoroastrian religion. In spite of that, he said that religious right is only subject to the other rights, other fundamental rights. One of the fundamental rights is equality between the denial of inequality or denial of equality between man and woman. He strongly stood by what he wrote earlier and said that no necessity for a review. Let us wait and see what will happen after the review petition is finally heard and disposed of. A true citizen cannot practice fundamental duties. H. Fundamental duty H says to develop scientific temper, humanism and spirit of inquiry and reform. At the same time, continue to practice religion. I may say, claiming immunity, that most of the religions contained unscientific thinking and practices. I am only putting it most, not all. Probably without my knowledge, there may be one or two. Most of the religions believe in superstitions, contrary to what is scientifically true. But how can an Indian citizen at the same time develop scientific temper and then practice religion which is not scientifically rooted or propagating science? The spirit of inquiry and reform is a fundamental duty now. What is the reform you can expect from a religion? Religions are rooted in orthodoxy. Religion cannot survive, unfortunately, in the world in a scientific temper or scientific analysis or reasoning. These are some of the real challenges which the Constitution has to face now. That is probably the main reason why when Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, after he took over the Prime Ministership of India, when interviewed by a French journalist, what is the major problem you are expecting to face? He said, the major problem will be how to establish a secular society in a highly saturated religious community in India. So we have to meet these challenges. On the one side, scientific temper and spirit of reform, spirit of inquiry, and on the other side, conservatism, orthodoxy, and things which are not scientifically established or true. This is a matter where the Constitution has to engage in future because these are the challenges. There are other challenges also. I said that I am dealing only limited. I think I am completing my talk on this aspect now by thanking you all for giving me such a patient hearing all the while. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for enlightening the young minds of our legal fraternity with sharing your wonderful experiences. Thank you once again, sir. Now, it is my privilege to introduce our Dean, Professor Gurudutt. Sir possesses more than 3.5 decades of experience in the field of teaching, in which he played many roles like principal, academic advisor, dean, law and academics, director, controller of examination, pro vice chancellor, and vice chancellor. Sir have extended his service to our faculty of law as a dean of faculty of law. Sir, I call upon you to make chair's remark along with vote of thanks. Over to you, sir. Sir, kindly unmute your mic, sir.
No, I am audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Raghupati, for your good remarks. Good introduction. Thank you. After listening to the veteran, Honorable Mr. Justice K.T. Thomas, Padma Bhushan awardee, I don't think there is any necessity to make any remarks on the constitution of this day. However, since the organizers have asked me to do this job, I try to put before you my views and my experience and my understanding of the constitution. Very briefly, dear friends, Honorable Justice Sir made a beautiful presentation and he covered almost all aspects from 1946 till date. And the articulation, in a very artistic way, he heralded the nuances of the Constitution, the unique features of the Constitution, and the challenges being faced by the Constitutions often, and how, as matured citizens, we could be able to sustain. Justice Sir, I happily agree with you that the Constitution will remain not just as a document, but as the major dharma of the Constitution for a very long time. Yes, it is not just 7 years, it is 70 years now. Few constitutional experts and political scientists call still we are in infancy when we compare ourselves with the Constitution of America or some other old constitutions or unwritten constitutions. But to me, to my understanding, in just 70 years, we could be able to achieve, and we have already overtaken all other constitutions so far as value delivery is concerned. Look, I keep telling in my addresses that the American Constitution to take more than 2 centuries to get one black as the president. Till now, to my knowledge, a woman has not become the head of the nation, wherein India has seen woman as the head, a Dalit, person from minority, whatnot. The constitutional aspirations have been meticulously met. True. It is but natural that aberrations do take place. That happens. It is a natural phenomenon. As Acton said, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Quite often, we refer to emergency situation, emergency period, how the power holder, power wielder try to abuse the situation. But the past 70 years, Constitution has been duly protected and been a highly sustained document because of a judiciary. We should compliment the judiciary in this regard. Of course, we do believe that the Constitution believes in separation of a power meticulously, the words and spirit, and no organ of the government, whether executive or legislature or judiciary, are supreme. It is the Constitution supreme. But we should appreciate judiciary, which has done an exemplary job by interpreting the Constitution in such a way where people will not look at judiciary as a supreme or legislature as supreme or executive as supreme. But at times when the other power holders try to transgress, try to cross the limits, the judiciary has entered into and says, look, you are wrong. Of course, political scientists do argue. Always they keep arguing that judiciary, suppose if you take even 13 judges bench, what is that 13 brains? How these 13 brains can determine the policy, made by 540 plus other, so many, hundreds of brains. In democracy, that is not correct. What legislature says is supreme. These kind of arguments often come. Yes, argument is good. But ultimately, when you look at the spirit of the Constitution, judiciary has been considered as the guardian of the Constitution. It has been doing an exemplary good job. Whether it is a Champakam Dorai Rajan or followed by plethora of cases, or Balaji, etc., or bank nationalization case, or as Sir highlighted, whether it's Gopalan or Golaknath or Keshwananda, or next Minerva Mills or Maneka Gandhi or latest Puttaswamy, look, umpty number of cases. The Supreme Court has been guarding a common man, a citizen, as per the aspirations of the Constitution, as per the aspiration of the Constitution. My dear friends, I believe, as a student of a Constitution, I do believe that this Constitution stands on two pillars. One is freedom of choice, and another one is the freedom of voice. If you amplify it, it encompasses everything, and ultimately that lands in Article 21. That is the launching pad. And Article 32 and 226, very, very important, two words of the heart been guarding it. Yes, ultimately, I sum up my delivery by saying that all the rights and freedoms are there to enjoy, not to abuse. Not to abuse. Then only we will find that sanctity. As a citizens, we are bound by the duties enshrined under Article 51A, fundamental duties. Let us respect that. Let us have Constitution as our dharma. Let us resolve this day that Constitution is our dharma. Personal religion worship, that is different thing. That is totally personal. Nothing to do with your nationalism or citizenship or whatever it is. As a human being, as a citizen of India, I am bound by my Constitution, my constitutional values. Let us not give room for the abuses, the transgressions, and other things. Justice sir, I would like to share one important thing. I was taught by Professor Devi Das. He's a veteran. He was also from Kerala. He taught me constitution, constitutional values. I think he is also 90 now, residing in Delhi. Veteran in constitutional law. Always he used to say, look, my dear friends, Constitution itself cannot become great on its own through its volume or number of articles or this, that, never. It's only the people who make it great. If you resolve, if you respect the Constitution as your parent, as your guardian, then you are protected. So, dharmo rakshati rakshitaha. If you protect dharma, dharma protects you. When I say dharma, never I am referring to any religion. That is a misinterpretation. Dharma here refers to rule of law. It is rule of law. Let us take a oath today that we respect the rule of law, we respect the dharma, that is constitution, that protects you. And I conclude my remarks saying that the Constitution of India has seen number of amendments, but I am of the opinion that all these amendments are indicating positive development. The cases, positive development. Day by day, we reach that maturity and keep doing the things. I don't want to look at them in a negative perspective at all. Thank you for the opportunity given. I shall thank the organizers for having provided me an opportunity to share my views. Sir, as the Dean of the School of Law, representing the university, I take this opportunity to thank you, Justice Mr. K.T. Thomas, sir, Padma Bhushan Awardee. Your presence is, I don't have words to express my happiness. And we seek your blessings. And informally, I would like to say that we may keep bothering you often to address our students and enlighten our students on specific aspects. Yes, sir. Just your glimpse is sufficient. That motivates them. Even if two students, they say, yeah, one day I should become a veteran like Justice K.T. Thomas, sir. That will be excellent. You have kindled that. And on behalf of the university, and on behalf of my faculty, and on behalf of my students, sir, we submit our humble pranams to you and kindly accept and bless us on this auspicious day, sir. That's all. Then I fail in my duty if I do not acknowledge that support extended by our President, Dr. Satyanarayan sir, who sent me a mail stating that yes, please go ahead, and I wish you all the success. Let it be a good program. Like that, sir, in your absence, as I submit our heartfelt thanks to you. Our Vice Chancellor, Professor Sandeep Sancheti sir, yesterday evening, see, we should keep learning the things from great personalities. Look, as a leader, he called me yesterday evening. He inquired about the program and he asked when sir is coming, how is coming, everything. And he said, yes, Professor, I will be there and I will interact with the person. Sir, you said I was thinking that you will be going away, but you are there with us, sir. Thank you very much on behalf of everyone here. I thank you, sir. And you are your spirit for us. And similarly, our registrar, Professor Sethu Raman, has been a guiding force for us and a source of encouragement. Thank you, Professor Sethu Raman. Dinakar, you done an excellent job. And yeah, this is how we should use our proximity with the persons, not for selfish kind of things. When we were thinking directly, you said, sir, why not to invite Justice Thomas, sir? Immediately, all we faculty members said, please go ahead. No second choice. Thank you, Dinakar. And I thank all my deans, heads, and other persons of the university who have extended their help and taken part in that. And unofficially, I was told that few High Court judges and a lot of officers and dignitaries have taken part in this program after hearing that Justice K.T. Thomas, sir, is there. So I thank you all, your lordship. I thank you, the visitors and the guests. And I should thank the IT team of the university. For the past 3-4 days, they have been working very hard and they have given us a seamless support for this program. Thank you, the entire team. My students, my faculty members have done an excellent job, and the organizing committee headed by Mr. Raghupati done. Thank you very much. And students, it is not just a program. I trust that you have taken a lot from this. Keep it up, read the Constitution well, and I give this call to each and every one student that you should take the preamble by heart, word by word, and that becomes the Bible till last breath. If you want to understand the Constitution, you should know that once, because that opens the minds of the Constitution. Preamble is the key to open the minds of the Constitution. Thank you. And I thank each and everyone who are behind the success of this program. This is Thomas, sir. Once again, I thank you. I thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Justice K.T. Thomas, sir. Thank you. Wonderful listening to you. And we look forward to your continued patronage and support to us, sir. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir. Let's raise for the national anthem.